These are 19 things I'd wish I'd known before buying my house in Atlanta, Georgia. So I purchased my home in 2012. This was before I worked in real estate, and looking back, I had no clue what I was doing. Now, luckily, everything turned out great. I love the house I purchased. However, after working in real estate for the last 6 to 7 years, I've realized there are a lot of questions I should have been asking, things I should have been looking out for before making that big decision. So I have here a list of 19 things that I wish I had known before purchasing that house. This is coming from my experience working with so many buyers purchasing in and around the Atlanta area and being a homeowner myself. These are some of the most important factors to consider, not just for buying a home, but for buying a home specifically in the Atlanta, Georgia area. So let's get right into it. By the way, if you're new here, my name is Mark. I make videos about what it's like to live in Atlanta, and if you need a fantastic realtor who can help you find the perfect neighborhood for you and your family and get you a great deal, feel free to call me, text me, set up a Zoom call using the link in the description below. I love when my viewers become clients. Number one, the homes in the Atlanta area are often older, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. This is a common cause of apprehension for my clients coming from markets like Florida, where in many areas the homes are completely new, and there's a lot more uniformity in the architectural design due to the climate. In Atlanta, we have all different types of homes, and many of those homes are old, which definitely can be something to look out for in terms of the inspection, knowing the age of the major systems and what condition they're in. However, especially because inventory is so low, I don't think you should exclude a certain age home. You could have a home that was completely renovated down to the foundation, but if that foundation wasn't scraped, it still has to have that original built-in year. So it could be in the 70s, 60s, or even 40s, and be a completely new renovation, but still have that built date. However, obviously in that scenario, all the systems in that home are gonna be brand new. Conversely, you can have a brand new construction home with a lot of issues. This is gonna depend on the quality of the builder and the quality of the materials used. I have definitely seen older homes that have been completely renovated or extremely well maintained that are more solid and pose less issues than brand new construction. So yes, typically with brand new construction, you should be dealing with less upkeep and maintenance in the near future, but don't exclude older homes in your search. Again, we're in a market where there's not a ton of inventory, so you don't want to limit yourself. You want to see as many options that could work for you and your family as possible, and that should include homes that may be a bit older than you were expecting. Number two, trees. You've got to look out for trees in this city. One of our monikers is we are a city in a forest. We have a huge tree canopy, and everywhere around Metro Atlanta, including the dense areas like Midtown and downtown, have lots of trees. This is important when looking at a home. You need to be aware of any large homes that are very close to your home or overhanging the roof. You need to pay attention to the condition of those trees. Are they dying? Are they rotting? Are they in great shape? You often want to engage an arborist for their expert opinion. And trees cause lots of issues, not just limbs. The roots can grow and expand and get into your sewer lines potentially. So when you're out looking at homes, trees are one of the biggest things you need to be paying attention to. And if there is something that looks like it could be an issue, you've got to follow up on that with the proper inspections and having experts come out and give you their opinion. Because I can tell you, trees and tree limbs fall here all the time. Every time we have a big storm, it's very common to see limbs doing damage, whether it's just hitting a car, crushing a home, whatever it is, it's not fun. So you do need to be aware of tree limbs in Atlanta. Number three, you need to be aware of how water is flowing around your home. Flooding is quite common here in the Atlanta area. We really don't deal with any natural disasters, but the closest thing to that would be your home or basement being flooded. We get big rains here, and you need to pay attention to the slope of your lot. And if you have a slope that is graded towards your house, you want to make sure that there is proper drainage to divert the water away from your foundation. There's lots of solutions. If the slope is graded towards the house, it's not a deal breaker per se, but you definitely want to be aware of what happens when it rains a lot around this home. In fact, going to tour homes during or just after a big rainstorm is one of the best times to do it, because you'll really get a sense for how it impacts your home in terms of where water is pooling up. I've seen swampy, soupy home situations touring homes in Atlanta after a big rain. It can be very messy and very inconvenient. You don't want water near your foundation, so You want to be aware of trees, and you want to be aware of the flow of water around your home when going to tour homes in Atlanta. Number 4, plant growth. Keeping your gutters clean and keeping tree limbs and growth away from the siding of your home. Now, those things can cause damage, but the point here is really keeping bugs away from your home. So mosquitoes and cockroaches are very prevalent, as I'm sure you've heard, in the South. And one of the best ways you can mitigate those things is keeping your gutters clear, keeping brushes and any type of foliage away from the siding or windows of your home, away from the foundation, clearing your yard of large piles of leaves or anything that could collect water. Stagnant water obviously attracts mosquitoes. So you are gonna deal with mosquitoes, you are gonna deal with cockroaches here in the South. However, just part of good, proper home maintenance is going to be keeping things clear, eliminating any stagnant bodies of water, and keeping all the foliage and growth away from your house, and hopefully you won't see any cockroaches. Number 5, focus on the important things with a home. It can be very overwhelming when you get an inspection report that's 50 pages long that calls out every nook and cranny in the home. That's what they're supposed to do. You gotta take a step back, take a deep breath, and look at what is going on with the major systems and what is the dollar cost associated with a potential repair. Mainly, obviously, we're looking for the condition of the roof, foundation, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and I would throw sewer line in there as well. Those are the items where, if they're much older or if there's any deferred maintenance or damage, those are big ticket repairs. Whereas if you have a non-GFCI outlet that gets a red hazard item, they have to put that red hazard item because it's an electrical issue, but you know, switching out a regular outlet to GFCI is a very, very cheap fix and one that you can probably do on your own. And so on these inspection reports, you're gonna see a mix of big items like the major systems I was talking about, really small piddly items like the switch plate covers and you know, little hairline cracks in a wall maybe, or maybe formerly damp spots that they're calling out. And you'll see some medium-sized items that you may want to address as well. But my advice is go in prepared and having the proper expectations before you look at these inspection reports. Do not get freaked out by the quantity of the items called out. Pay attention to the quality or significance of the items that are being called out, and tie everything to a dollar value repair. Engage handyman and contractors, get quotes, and it may not be as bad as you think, or it could be much worse, but you don't want to let your emotions get involved. You want to stick with facts and numbers, and the best way to do that is understanding the cost of any potential repair that shows up on a report. Number 6, I highly recommend you get a sewer scope and radon test. And these are things that people in other markets aren't as familiar with because they don't deal with these types of issues. But as I was saying before, because you have massive trees in Atlanta, these tree roots often interfere with sewer lines running from your home to the public street. And these can crack the lines and cause big issues. But also these lines are just old, right? So we see a lot of these lines that are failing for a number of different reasons, whether they've got a belly in the line where there's standing water, or some sort of crack. It could be a million different things, but that can be an expensive repair. So I always recommend spending an additional couple $100s to have a plumber send a video scope through your waistline to examine the condition of it. And if something comes up, you have the opportunity to negotiate that with the seller. Whereas if you figure out this issue later on, it's not gonna be pleasant and you're not gonna have anyone to bargain with. The other one is a radon test, and this may be a little bit more prevalent for families with children. However, I think we all wanna be safe and healthy in our home. Radon is an odorless gas that comes up from the ground and in large enough concentrations can cause really serious health issues like lung cancer. And so what the inspector will do is put a radon test in the home for 48 hours with all the windows and doors closed and get an average reading, and the EPA has a recommendation for what is safe or not. If you have an elevated level, again, you can negotiate a radon mitigation system, which honestly isn't that expensive, but you really want to be aware because this is a real thing. It's not a gimmick. You can Google it. Radon is prevalent. So, you know, these things do jack up the price of inspections, but that's sort of just the name of the game when you're going to buy a house. You got to know all the information so that you can negotiate with the seller, and also so you can decide if you want to move forward. So those things are not gimmicks. I do recommend you always get a sewer scope and radon test. Number 7, don't try to time the real estate market. A lot of my clients are so obsessed with getting what they perceive to be a great deal that they may make what I think are not great decisions for this process. Waiting is not a strategy. It's not a real estate strategy. It's not a financial investment strategy. Waiting is just doing nothing. And you're waiting for an outcome that you're not sure if it's gonna happen, right? Maybe you're hoping interest rates will drop. Maybe you're hoping prices will drop. But there's so many other factors that are gonna go on during this process that may impact you more negatively than you thought. Whenever someone asks me about this, my philosophy is always prioritize your life situation, especially if you're moving here from another state. You've got a timeline, you've got all these factors about when you need to be here and what type of place you need to be in and where it needs to be. Waiting on the market to do something, let's say for instance, you wanna wait for the winter market because there are less buyer competition during that time. Well, there's also less homes to choose from in that time. Or you want to wait to the spring summer market where you have the most amount of options available. You're also gonna have the most amount of buyers that you're competing with during that time, right? So it really balances out in the end. If you're waiting on interest rates to drop, well, let's say they do drop a full point or 2 points. That's fantastic, but what happens then? Prices shoot up because everyone can afford a home and you've got a bloodbath in the buying market. So, you know, these things seesaw. I highly recommend you prioritize your life situation. If you have the means to purchase a home and you have a home budget where you're not going to be stressed out about the mortgage payment and you feel good about being in Atlanta for the near future and owning a home in general, go ahead and purchase as soon as your circumstance allows, but never try to time the market. I promise it's a fool's errand. Number 8, the neighborhood is way more important than the house. People may disagree with me. Obviously, the house is extremely important. However, what I'm trying to convey here is that a house is a house, right? Wherever it is, you're gonna judge it on its own merits and it's either gonna meet your needs or it's not. Whereas the neighborhood really requires a lot of thought about if it's gonna deliver what you and your family need in a neighborhood, whether it be commute to work, commute to family, the amenities that you like, the school assignments that you like, the safety level that you like. You want to start there and then find that house within that neighborhood versus the opposite approach, because you can find that house that would work for you probably in most neighborhoods, but the opposite is not true. In other words, there are probably only certain neighborhoods that are gonna check all your major boxes. So this is why I always say when people wanna travel in town from out of state and see a million homes, we can do that, but if you're still trying to figure out which neighborhood is good for you, being inside all day is not gonna help with that problem, all right? You really wanna spend your time in a car, driving around those neighborhoods that could work, going to some of the restaurants, seeing what the subdivisions and architecture look like, getting a feel for the traffic patterns and local amenities, and really gaining confidence that that neighborhood is going to deliver on what you need. And then once you've established that, then you can sort of hone in on which house you're going to be happiest in. So in my opinion, the neighborhood is way more important than the home itself. Number 9, these homes are gonna look way worse in person generally, right? The photos are very deceiving. Obviously, they're trying to convey the best version of a home possible. So this is really hard if you don't have a lot of experience in real estate, if you're not a real estate agent, it can be really hard to know what to look for. I know what to look for, and it's even hard to explain to people. Anytime a client says they want to see a house, I'm going to vet that. I'm going to pressure test it and look to see if there's anything that would disqualify it right off the bat so we can save ourselves time. And I can tell you that it's kind of a holistic thing, whereas if you have professional photos with great light, everything is balanced and proportioned, and everything looks good and clean, you can't see any damage, there's lots of photos, and the description is good, it looks very professional, that's a good sign. That's a sign that this is probably a good home with good homeowners who hired a good agent to sell it to you. When you see very few photos or blurry photos or photos with a finger in the frame over the lens, or if you see damage in one of the photos or messiness, it's probably gonna be way worse in person. That's a sign that the seller doesn't care, that they didn't maintain the home, and they didn't do a lot of diligence in choosing who to list their home. Now, that's not always the case, but those are some rules of thumb that I personally look for. But just keep in mind, the home is rarely gonna look better than what you're seeing in the listing photo. So if you're just hoping it looks a little dingy, but maybe it looks better in person, It almost certainly does not, and you should probably skip over the dingy stuff. People will send me listings with no photos sometime, and that's a big red flag. That probably means there's something they don't want you to see, or they're just too lazy to put photos. So you definitely, I know it can be very exciting to see a new listing in the area that you're looking at, but you want to see the green flags of a really professional presentation with you really shouldn't be able to see anything out of the ordinary. You shouldn't be able to see any damage or poor lighting or blurriness or poor staging when you're looking at photos. And that should be a sign to you of what is probably worth going to tour in person. Number 10, not everything is a conspiracy. Some clients I work with approach the buying situation with an attitude of, the seller is out to get me, they're trying to pull one over on me, and I need to be very vigilant about not getting screwed, which I understand. This is one of your biggest life purchases, and you don't want to get screwed. You don't want to make a big mistake, and you don't want to buy a money pit, and you want to get a great deal. So this totally makes sense. However, although yes, sellers can act shady, and of course there have been many documented cases of sellers doing bad things and buyers suffering, in general, on average, for the most part, sellers are above board. They're trying to do the right thing. They want to do a good job and sell their home with no issues. They certainly don't want you coming back and trying to sue them. They don't want to deal with this once they sell it. They want their money and they want to move on, just like you would if you were going to sell your house. So, you really have to rely on your realtor to discern what is something to be concerned about and what's not. For instance, people get very hung up on the sales history. When it was listed, how many price changes or reductions you had, if it was taken off the market and put back on the market, if it went under contract and went back active. People get really nervous, like, oh, that's a huge red flag, there's gotta be an issue there. It could be, but most often it's not. It's some sort of circumstance, market situation, life situation. Now, of course, these are all things your realtor should follow up on. I'm not saying your realtor or you shouldn't follow up on these items, but I just would encourage you to go into this with an attitude of seeing the best intentions in people and relying on your realtor to discern what is an issue and what's not an issue. I've just found that if you have the attitude of suspiciousness, it's going to infect all of your decision making throughout this process. When you're negotiating repairs, when you're talking about what needs to be done, when you're negotiating prices, if you have the attitude that the seller's out to get you, it's probably going to negatively impact you at some point. Now again, if your realtor is telling you this is shady, if something is just blatantly shady, using your own logic, then sure, listen to your gut or follow up on it as much as you can. But I would just encourage you not to have a overly suspicious or conspiratorial mindset when getting into the home buying process. Number 11, your lender and closing attorney matter a lot. A lot of people want to put off the financing piece. They say, oh, I got that, I make good money, I've got the down payment. And that's true, but the lender is part of your team that's going to help you have a great experience and get a great result. I deal with a lot of out-of-state clients, and they often want to use a lender that's in their state, which can be okay, but in real estate, every state has their own real estate contracts that they use. So whenever I work with an out-of-state lender, I find myself having to explain the contracts to the professional. Now, that's obviously not as an ideal situation as someone who is local, who has loads of experience with these contracts and knows them inside and out, right? Especially when we deal with a hot market, your lender becomes an oversized importance because all things being equal price-wise, how quick they can close, how quick they can get back an appraisal, how quick they can fully approve you, and their communication with you and the listing agent is hugely important to edging out other buyers that are bidding on the same home. So you want to listen to your realtor's recommendation for a lender, and there are certain things you need to know about any lender that you're going to work with outside of interest rates and pricing. Yes, you can do some shopping, but you're not going to get an amazing rate that no one else got with a lender, right? These things are benchmarked and pretty solid, and you can buy down the rate or you can get some sort of incentive, in particular with new construction homes, but I would really prioritize the quality of the lender more so than just the pricing. And then for the closing attorney, this is probably something you want to rely on your realtor. However, I would just encourage you to make sure that you are using an established closing attorney that has a long track record. Closing attorneys have scandals from time to time, mostly around not using earnest money funds properly, commingling funds, taking from the funds. We have some stories of closing attorneys in the Atlanta area that have been shut down and people have been put in jail because of that. So you don't have to worry too much about this. Hopefully you don't have to deep dive this, but it's probably good to just ask your realtor some general questions about what closing attorney you're going to be using. Number 12, your realtor matters. Now, these days, people love to make fun of realtors. What do? They're overpaid. They don't really matter. The reality is a good realtor is a consultant for you. They're an advisor. They should be able to download all the information that you give them in terms of what's most important to you through this process and match you with a neighborhood and a home that's going to deliver on those things. And of course, negotiate on your behalf to the best of their ability. Make sure you're getting a great deal. Make sure you're not getting screwed in any way, and really taking you through from A to Z and making sure this process is as seamless and stress-free as possible. And really good realtors do that, and the bad ones do the opposite. So I know it can be very confusing to understand what a realtor does, but they have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure your money is protected and you're protected throughout this process. So you need to be hiring someone with experience, which, as a brand new realtor, I wouldn't have wanted to hear, but the reality is the more reps that you have, the more things that you've seen, the more you know what to do in a given scenario. So take your time, don't hire your aunt or cousin who just got their license. Find someone who works that area locally and has a lot of deals, and trust them to take you through this process. 13, live near the things that you do. This seems obvious. Atlanta has terrible traffic, and unless you want to spend all your time in a car, you want to figure out where your work's going to be and your most important amenities and your family, and you want to live as close to those things as possible, unless you want to be in your car all day. And of course, this is limited by your budget. We only have so many options of where we can live, but just keep in mind this is a sprawled out car dependent city with not great public transit, and traffic is horrible here. So if you're buying a home in Atlanta, figure out the things that you're going to be spending the most time at and live as close to that area as possible. 14, contributions are more impactful than a sticker price reduction. A lot of people get so hung up on getting $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000 off the price, when in reality it has a minimal impact on your monthly mortgage payment. Whereas if you get $10,000 or $15,000 in a seller contribution to your closing costs, that is $10,000 to $15,000 of liquid money that you do not have to bring to the closing table, that can thus be used for an interest-bearing account, some sort of investment, or something that you need to spend in the home. But saving liquid cash is always going to have a more outsized impact than a reduction in the sales price. So when I negotiate with my clients, I always advise starting with the contribution more so than the price reduction. 15, there is no dream home. Well, most people understand this, but some people still really get caught up in the romanticism of purchasing a home. And this is a bad scenario. Number one, because there is no such thing as a dream home. I guarantee if you find a quote unquote dream home and you lose out on it, you will find something not only as good, but probably that you like better. I've seen it happen time and time again. But more importantly, if you have the mentality that this home that you're pursuing is a dream home, you're really giving up all your leverage. Whether the seller knows that you think it's a dream home or not, when you're putting in an offer price, you're going to keep in mind it's a dream home and you're not going to be as aggressive. When you're negotiating repairs after an inspection, you're going to be very nervous to lose the home and you're going to do whatever the seller says that they'll do. So it's not a good position to be in negotiating wise to look at something as a dream home. You truly want to be able to walk away if the circumstances don't benefit you or meet what your needs are. That's a very powerful position to be in leverage wise. I do want this home, but I can walk away. If you think it's a dream home, you're much less likely to do that, and that's when I see really bad scenarios occur. The other thing is you're probably only going to be this home statistically for the next 5 to 7 years. Unless you're much, much older, it's very unlikely this is your forever home. So keep that in mind. Number 16, buy well within your budget. Again, this may seem obvious, but the worst thing in the world is to be stressed out by a monthly mortgage payment. Based on your income and your job and what your pay range is at that job, whether you get fired or not and have to get another one, figure out what monthly payment will not stress you out and stay in that budget. Will it limit the house that you can get or limit the neighborhoods you can be in? Of course, but it will also be a much better financial decision. And with interest rates in the mid sixes, if you buy a home at that rate and it comes down to the mid fours and you refinance, well, now you're in a very good financial position. You're living well below your means in terms of housing, and that's just a good financial approach. So make sure you're very in tune with what the monthly payment is going to be attached to a certain purchase price, and make sure you feel good about making that monthly payment. Number 17, every home is an investment property. As I was saying, statistically, you're only gonna have this home for 5 to 7 years on average. And so I think it is really beneficial to enter into this process understanding that at some level, the home you're purchasing is an investment property. It's one of your largest purchases of your life. It has a potential to create some of the most wealth in your life. And so you do want to be thinking about things you may not otherwise have thought of, like, how is this neighborhood growing? Or is this home appealing to the most amount of people if I want to go resell it? Or if I want to rent this home out, is it near highways or amenities that people who are renting would want to live near? And also, how am I going to exit this home? When am I going to sell it? What could I expect to sell it for? Who would I sell it to? You know, there's a lot of things that go into that, but I find approaching this with a mentality that at some level, the home you're purchasing is an investment property will get you thinking about things you otherwise wouldn't have and will be beneficial for you in the long term. Number 18, avoid buying unique homes. Now, get the home that you want, but again, looking at it as an investment property, you're gonna go sell it at some point. You don't want something you've never seen before. That's generally bad, right? You know, in a perfect world, we want mass appeal. And it doesn't even have to be that weird. You know, I have had experiences of recently trying to sell a split level home in a community where it was the only one. And there's nothing wrong with split level homes. We do have a lot of them here in the area, but you don't get that traditional open concept floor plan, and you often don't get the large primary bedroom and bathroom in a split level. So you are working at a bit of a deficit from the open concept craftsman or ranches or whatever it is. So you don't have to get too granular with this, but if you walk into a home and see something you've never seen before, it just strikes you as incredibly odd, and it's not something that's easily changeable, you may want to approach with some caution. Uniqueness in terms of the structure or layout is usually not a good thing. Now, if it's a wall that's painted a certain way, well, you can fix that very easily, but anything that's unique and not easily changeable should give you pause. And number 19, don't get so hung up on a great deal. You know, I have people approach this process where they just need a great deal. They want to feel like they won. They want to feel like they got a better deal than everyone else, which I get, right? And that makes sense. You're protecting your money, and that makes perfect sense. But I often find these people don't factor in the totality of what a great deal is, especially if you're moving from another state. You've got to factor in your timeline and convenience and stress, right? For instance, if you buy a home that checks all your boxes neighborhood-wise, checks all your priorities house-wise, and is well within your budget, but it's a new listing that's popular and you end up having to buy it at sticker price with no concessions, that's still a great deal, in my opinion, right? You got everything you needed within your budget and the timeline that was not stressful for you. That is a great deal. Getting $10,000 off the price would be great, but guess what? The list price is arbitrary. To some degree, they just made that up. So how great can you feel about getting a sticker price off an arbitrary listing price, right? Again, you want to pay more attention to your life circumstance and how easy and convenient this is going to be for you and your family. And you probably want to pay attention to what kind of contributions you're getting to reduce cash to close. But the reality is we're still in a seller's market. There's more demand than there is supply. The sellers have the leverage, so you're only going to get so many concessions, and it's only going to feel like such a great deal. If that flips and we have more supply than we do demand, then yeah, you'll be in a better position to get big reductions. But that is not the case right now. So I would encourage you to, yes, you want to get the best deal possible, but don't let this deter you from something that checks all your boxes, but that you have to pay full price for. So there you have it, 19 things I wish I knew before buying a home in the Atlanta area. I really hope that was helpful for you and provided you some value. As always, you can contact me and do a free consultation. Set up a Zoom call using the link in the description below. Call me, text me, whatever you want to do. But I love when my viewers become clients. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.